Okay, so now I'll pass on to our presenters from Hinchingbrooke School, who are going to deliver the presentation. That's Lee Walker, Vice Principal of Achievement, and first of all, Andrew Golding, Principal of the school.
Andrew Golding, as you've heard, Principal of Hinchingbrooke School. Both Lee and I have been using CATS material now for a number of years, but both of us were appointed new to post this time last year. Second headship for me and second vice principalship for Lee. And this is the start of our second year. And as you can see from the slide, the school we've inherited is quite a large school. We have 1,950 students, 450 of whom approximately are in the sixth form. It's the largest secondary school in Cambridgeshire, and one of the things we've done is to re-engineer, restructure the school. So all the departments are divided up into one of 4 directorates. Each directorate is led by a vice principal, director of learning, and their responsibility is the standards of progress and attainment and the quality of teaching and learning within that directorate. And obviously the appropriate use of a variety of data sources is fundamental to that. So that's the academic profile of the school. And in addition to that, we've divided the school into lower school, middle school and upper school. The lower school is years 7 and 8, middle school 9, 10, 11, and upper school is the sixth form. And the final thing, just to set the context, is that our students are very normally distributed. All of our students come from a very, very wide catchment area. There's not one homogeneous unit. They come from wide socioeconomic backgrounds and a complete spread of all abilities. So that's the background. We're very happy later to answer any questions that you pose to us. But for now, I'll hand over to Lee Walker to talk you through how we're introducing CATS in this school.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I want to talk to you about why it is that we've introduced CAT4 here. As Andrew said, I'm a seasoned user of CATS in the past. But when Andrew and I arrived at Hinchingbrooke, we came across a situation where essentially target setting was based quite solely on Key Stage 2 data that we got from our primary schools. We had been using some midges tests, but they weren't really part of the target setting process. And teachers and students didn't really understand their targets. Teachers felt that the targets had been imposed upon them based on how students did at primary school, and students just simply were handed the targets and told that this is what they've got to get. There's quite a lot of misunderstanding still about target grades and predicted grades and estimated grades, and so one of the key things that we wanted to do by introducing CAT4 was to solve that problem and to make it clear to students and staff that actually targets could be generated a different way. So we've introduced CAT4 with year 7 and the students who've just gone into year 10, and we've already seen lots and lots of benefits from doing so, which I hope you'll see as we go through this presentation. So how are we going to use CATS to set targets? Well, our students, as I say, in year 7 and 10 have taken the test recently, and we have taken what CAT is saying their aspirational grade will be, if challenged grade. We're still looking at Fisher Family Trust data. We're looking at their attendance, and we're in close consultation with heads of year and tutors about anything else that we know about the students. So using CAT4 data helps us to have a much wider source of data to use for setting targets. And we've produced for every student in 7 and 10 a minimum target trajectory based heavily on what CAT is saying they should be able to do, so that we can map out their progress over their 5 years in Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. And we know, for instance, with our year 10 students that we can review where we are with the targets by the end of year 10 And if students are making great progress and seem to be bettering their target, using CATS obviously gives us a chance to refine those targets as the students start in year 11. So that's what we're planning to do next year. And I have found the process much easier with the CAT data. It used to be that we had enormous spreadsheets and lots of chances graphs and all that kind of thing when we did target setting before CATS. And actually now, just having the CATS data there to hand tells us really everything we need to know about the student and gives us some real-time information about them because they've just sat the test. So, this is data from one of our current Year 10 students. You can see that, quite interestingly, one of the things that we hadn't realised before we did the CAT test here, but we can instantly look at what her Key Stage 3 indicators were. So she took the test at the end of Year 9, and she'd just done some Year 9 tests, and so we could instantly see how well she'd done in the test compared to how well she should have done, because CAT provided us with Key Stage 3 indicators, so we can see where the student should have been by the end of Year 9, and we can see how effective our teaching has been through Key Stage 3 by comparing that. So this is showing us where this particular student, the most probable outcomes for this particular student by the end of Year 9. The orange is her probability of obtaining a level 6 or higher in each of these different subject areas. And you can see that the CAT4 test, and this is a CAT4F test, this is telling us where she should have been by the end of Year 9. And sorry, let's go back there. And the other thing that we can get instantly from the CAT tests is where this student should be by the end of Year 11. And this is what we've been using to set students' targets in Year 10 and 11. So you can see the probability that she will get an A or an A star in each of these different subject areas is very clearly displayed. And the middle column, just over here, shows the probability or what she will do if she's challenged. And so it's very, very easy to marry this data with what we know about her by the end of Year 9, what the Fisher Family Trust are saying or estimating that she could achieve, and we've got some real-time information about this particular student. And as you can see, as Andrew said, we've got 300 students in every year group. It's really important that we've got such valuable data about all of them. So, for us, the most important people in the process are the students themselves. And with our old target setting process, as I've said, it was simply a case of they received their estimate from Fisher Family Trust. The school used to just simply turn that estimate into a target. There wasn't any refinement based on even how the students had attended or anything about the student's particular needs. It was just simply, here's your Fisher Family Trust estimate, and that will be your target. Well, now, students are much more involved in the process. I'm about to do assemblies and write to all the students, telling them what their targets are going to be, but explaining to them that as they've just sat a CAT test, and they remember what they did on the CAT test, this is where their targets have come from. And as you'll see in a moment, the reports that we've got from the CAT4 testing give us lots of really good information that we can share with the students individually about how they've got on in the test and how they will get on during Key Stage 4. Target setting, therefore, becomes more real. The students can understand it. They've sat a test, they know what they did, how they did in the test, they can see their results in the test, and therefore they can clearly understand where their target has come from. And the information that the test gives us will help them learn more independently across their curriculum, because it will tell the students what their strengths and areas for development are. It gives them ideas about how they can develop their learning at home, about the kind of things that they can and can't do so well in the classroom. So it can help the students understand about their own learning and suggest areas that they can work on. so that obviously, you know, if they know what their target is by the end of year 11 and they've seen the CAP data, they can feel confident that they should be able to get there. Obviously, Fisher Family Trust doesn't provide that level of detail, and it was down to the individual members of staff sort of to start the ball rolling when they first met the students. And because the students know where they fit in terms of their own CAP data compared to the national picture, we're confident that this will actually motivate the students, given that they've got 2 tests during their time at Hinchingbrooke School. It will actually motivate them and incentivize them to develop in the four batteries of the CAP test: the verbal, the quantitative, the non-verbal, and the spatial. So we're hoping that the most important customers in the school, the people who really do need to buy into this, the students, because of this kind of personalised approach and talking to them not just in assembly but in tutor time as well, and actually being able to sit with them and go through in detail what their CAP results are, will help them understand the process much better. And dare I say, the second most important people in the process, the people at home who play such an important part in supporting our students, the parents. We've bought a full set of reports from the CAP4 tests. So the parents have some considerable detail based on how their son or daughter has done in the test, have some detail about how they can support at home too. So we're hoping that there will be massively increased potential to support for parents to support children at home, and it will help to inform our conversations with them at parents' evening, because we can not just sit with the raw data from what's happened in class, but also look at what happened when they did a CAP test and talk about, you know, why we've done certain things and how they've progressed in certain areas compared to how they were when they sat their test. And in a sense, we kind of missed a trick this year, because we've done, as I say, we did the CAP test with our current year 10. We actually did it right at the end of year 9 with them. What we're going to do this year is do it slightly earlier, so that when students come to choose their options, and we're moving to a 3-year Key Stage 4 with our current year 7, but when students come to choose their options, they will find it much, much easier to do so based on the information that the CAP reports give them. So if they are more spatially able, then it may be that they want to choose subjects which demand that kind of ability as a core part of the subject. If they know that they've got an extreme verbal bias, then it might make more sense to them why they want to choose 3 different languages in the options blocks. So we're going to change the timing of our CAP test this year so that we can use it powerfully at options time. So I've mentioned the detail that we're going to use with our students and with our parents that comes from the CAP reports. This is the summary report on the student that we've just been looking at, and it talks about, it gives advice for her and for her parents about the different ways that she will benefit from learning. Because this student has a mild verbal bias, she is going to find it much more helpful to use videos, books, online resources, etc. I'm sorry, I don't think she has a mild verbal bias. I think she has a mild spatial bias. So she'll find verbal text slightly more challenging to access. This is a spatial learner. So you can see on the report 6 or 7 bullet points which talk to her directly and to her parents about how well she will be able to access the curriculum and what support they can provide for her at home. So how will the teachers benefit from CAP4? Well, as I said at the start, our teachers were in a situation where they didn't really trust the data. Because the targets were based solely on Fisher Family Trust estimates, they found it difficult to understand what the difference between an estimate and a predicted grade and a target grade was. They didn't like the fact that the targets seemed solely to be based on Key Stage 2 data, and they feel that primary schools sometimes, some primary schools help students more with their Key Stage 2 exams, and therefore that wasn't fair, and they felt, I guess, slightly worried that because targets are linked with performance management, that if targets are solely based on that measure alone, what's happened in primary school, then they kind of felt a lack of accountability or a lack of control over the targets and how they've been generated. So this actually helps the teachers now feel a lot more confident in the target setting process. They can see the reality that the student has sat a test at Hinchingbrooke School. It isn't just based on what happened in primary, and they can see much more clearly, this is what I mean by the first bullet point, much more clearly what the individual students' abilities are, what their learning styles are. They can see whether they've got a particular bias towards verbal or spatial, and this will help them in their planning for the teaching of that particular group. So, for instance, if they want to do group work, they might think about putting the more able verbal students together, or they might want to range the verbal and spatial students through the groupings to try and mix things up a little bit. They'll know instantly what the different abilities are of the students in their group, and so they can plan their schemes of work, they can tailor their lessons to individual strengths and weaknesses, and they can show that students are making progress. If they've started from a low verbal baseline, that they are really helping the students to make progress with their verbal ability or their spatial ability. So it just gives another way of teachers being able to show that students are making progress. Obviously important in terms of Ofsted, but much more important in terms of teachers having ownership of students for 2 years during Key Stage 4 and showing exactly how they're helping that individual student to progress. So this scatter graph actually contains most of the students in our current Year 10 and gives heads of year an instant picture of their year group. You can see up here, there is one boy who has an extreme verbal bias. In fact, he scored 120 on his verbal test in the CATS, and he really didn't come out very well in the spatial. So he's quite an extreme example, and there are some students over here who have more of a spatial awareness than anything else. But you can see in these 7 different areas that we've got a reasonable spread, boys in blue and girls in pink. And so the head of year, looking at this, can build up a fairly clear picture of where the year group is and what they might expect the year group to do. By the way, if you're counting, there aren't 300 dots on there. As I say, some of the students, most of the students took their test at the end of Year 9, but we had some people who weren't around for the test, were absent, and so they took their test at the start of Year 10. And I've not included these people in this presentation. So just in case you were counting the dots, there aren't 300 dots there, but there would be if you printed out the full report on these students. And actually, CAT gives us the power to do a report on any group of students that we want to. So this is the group of girls who've just started Creative Textiles in Year 10. And you can see on here that, well, they are all girls. Not many students in the group. I think, again, some of them took their PAT test at the start of Year 10, so aren't included. But I guess fortunately, most of them are over the line here heading towards an increased spatial bias. So you might expect that students who are choosing Creative Textiles would be in that range. But over here, we've got a couple of girls who are heading towards a mild or a moderate verbal bias too. So the teacher of 10A Creative Textiles, when they get this report, can identify these 2 students and make sure that they are providing them with verbal teaching with lots of documents that contain more words than pictures, so that they can actually show that they're accessing the curriculum and they're helping these students to develop, because they've not got as high a spatial ability as the other students in the group. Here's another report. This report is on a French group in Year 10, and again, this is something that we will give to the teachers. Obviously next year when we do the CAT test a little bit earlier, we can give it to the teacher for the start of the year. And as well as looking at a scattergraph, the teacher can see all of the students in their group and can see what the CAT scores were in each of the 4 different batteries. And interestingly for teachers, they can see a ranking for each of the different batteries as well. So here is the boy that I mentioned who was very high verbal bias. He's first in this French group for his verbal ability, but as you can see over here, he's got quite a jagged bias, because I think he's in 16th position for quantitative, 13th position for non-verbal, 15th position for spatial. So this boy will excel in verbal work, but will not do quite so well if there are images and other things that the teacher's providing. So this gives a really good overview for the teacher to use when they're planning their lessons for this group, and it's got their overall standardized score and their group ranking too. And again, this is what the teacher of that particular group will get in a report on the group, and it gives the teacher some specific advice on how to help students who've got extreme verbal bias, what sort of things we can expect them to do particularly well. So, obviously they will do well in written work. They're going to be the ones who will enjoy discussion and debate. So don't be surprised when they keep putting their hand up in class. Don't be surprised when they're volunteering to lead debates, because they've got an extreme verbal bias. But obviously, each of the other students in the group has got a particular, may have a bias or maybe relatively even, but there is advice here for that teacher, and I blanked the names out, but you can see, if you saw the report, you'd see the names of the sort of 2 or 3 students up here, 7 or 8 students down here who fall into these different categories. And on your register, in your mark book, you can mark their scores, you can mark that they've got a bias, and you can show quite clearly when you're planning your lesson what you're intending to do with each of these individual students. So I think I said earlier on, one of the slides talked about personalising the whole process. It isn't just about target setting for us, it really is about digging into students' learning styles, going beyond the old sort of visual, auditory and kinesthetic, but actually being really clear on what these students can and can't do, so they can hit the ground running. And heads of department, heads of year and senior leadership have also got their own reports in CAT. I've talked about building confidence in our target setting procedures here. The fact that CAT is benchmarked, the vast majority of schools use CAT in the UK, and so we can benchmark ourselves with them. We can see how we compare, or how our students compare in the different batteries compared to national schools, and we can get indicators of potential, how students are going to do by the time they get to the end of Key Stage 3 and the end of Key Stage 4, both if they're challenged and if we simply stick with the most likely outcome. And for heads of departments, this gives instantly an extra tool that they can use when they're having their appraisal discussions with colleagues in their department, because it's not just about raw data, it's actually about how their colleagues have helped to develop students who have particular who haven't done particularly well in certain batteries on the CAT test, but also if teachers are showing a particular ability of teaching students with a verbal bias particularly well, then they can share what they do with other colleagues in the departments, and again, that can be part of their appraisal. So there's all sorts of possibilities. I guess we're only scratching the surface here of how you could use the CAT for data. So this is a report that head of year might produce from the CAT data. Obviously it would have every student in the year group. You can see where they all compare to each other in terms of the 4 batteries. And here you can see kind of ranked overall. So much more impressive set of data here than simply ranking them by their Key Stage 2 average point score, which is what the school was doing before. You've got something here which really helps you dig into which students are going to do particularly well. And obviously you can export all of this data into Excel spreadsheets. So you can see if you filter on this column over here, you could start to see which students are going to need particular support. You can cross-reference it with whether they've done particularly well on the verbal quantitative or which ones they've not done well on. So you can start to see with your special needs department who will need particular help in which particular areas. So a very powerful set of data for a head of year to have. This graph shows the head of year instantly how their year group compare to the national average. Here is the national baseline, national average line, and so we can see that in our year 10 that our middle ability students over here seem to do much better in verbal and quantitative here than nationally. We don't have as many students as nationally that fit into the very low category ability, and we've got, I guess, fairly similar to national students who are very high ability. So you can see at a glance how your year group compares to national. And again, very powerful set of data here. I've just been using this very report in target setting with the head of year, or year 10. And over here, you can see the probabilities of them getting an A to C, including English and Maths, the total point score they might get at GCSE, and their best 8 GCSE point score. Very important when you're working out what value you're adding to students. This is the sort of baseline score that we should expect from each student by the end of year 11. And again, if you export this into an Excel spreadsheet, you can filter this particular column, so you can instantly see who's got the lowest probability of getting 5A to C, and you can start to plan any intervention groups that you might want to run during Key Stage 4. And obviously this works the same for Key Stage 3 as well. But you can already start to plan which students might benefit from intervention, who you might want to intervene with at the start of year 10, if they've got a particular area that they need a boost on, and who might need some more careful attention throughout year 10 and 11, because their probability of getting a 5A to C in English and Maths is around the 40 to 60% mark. So they're going to be the kind of middle ability students that you hope that you will convert to 5A to C, including English and Maths. And for the senior leadership team, again, another fairly detailed report which shows what we can expect if we don't challenge the students at all. For this current cohort of year 10, we can expect 5A to C around about 66%. But we've used the if challenged grades to set our targets. So I've worked out that we're heading somewhere towards 80%. 5A to C, including English and Maths, rather than 66. But again, you can share this with the staff, you can share it with the students as well. You can say, look, this is what might happen if we don't challenge any of you, but of course, we want to challenge you and you want to challenge yourself. So this is what will happen if you are challenged. But you can understand much better what the cohort might have the potential of doing by the time they get to the end of year 11. You can see and obviously work out levels of progress in English and Maths and Science. You can have discussions with heads of departments looking at these summary indicators, and you can talk to governors about what might be expected, etc. So all in all, this is now providing us with a much clearer picture of our Year 7 and our Year 10 students, and long may it continue. I don't want to go back to the old days of just simply using the FFT data and heads of department not trusting any of it and students not understanding any of it. So So this is where we are at the moment. And I think that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Lee and Andy. I think we can all do it. It's a very interesting presentation. It has sparked up a number of questions, which is always a good sign of something that's caught people's interest. If I could put those to you for your response. One of the interesting ones was, how do you handle the potentially demotivating aspect of predictions that talk about low grades? If somebody's predicted, E's or possibly worse, how do you approach that in the interviews with pupils and parents?
I think if I give an overview, first of all, I think it's age related. I think all students are on a journey when they come into us in year 7. We want to be as motivational and inspirational as we can and get them to aspire to believe that they can achieve anything with the right mindset and the right support and the right curriculum and so on and so forth. But as a student goes through from year 7 at the age of 11 years old towards the age of 16 when they're in year 11 and taking the exams, they're gradually on a journey of understanding themselves and understanding in a more realistic way what the likely outcomes are going to be. And I think without dictating, if you like, from SLT, there's no school policy on this, but I think members of staff naturally help the students go on that journey. It's not that we don't want our year 11s to be aspirational, of course we do. And we still want to motivate them. But as they get older, they have to be more realistic. And for those that are going to be applying to the sixth form, we very definitely put the message out that you have to be self-reflective and realistic in what courses you're likely to be able to access. So I think it's a journey that happens a little bit naturally. It's not something that we have a policy for. And I think it comes down in a lot of cases to the individual interactions, often by the form tutor, but by heads of year and subject teachers as well. And I think we have to take the parents on that journey too. I don't know whether Lee wants to add anything.
Yeah, I think that really sort of sums up my feeling too. It's important to be realistic, and there are going to be students who won't get grade C. And I think any conversation that you have with students and with parents has to recognise that fact. I think we have to move away from this idea of the fact that we're expecting everybody to get 5 A to C including English and Maths, because that isn't going to happen. We have to make sure that students understand why it is, because part of our journey is broadening our Key Stage 4 curriculum and understanding why it is that particular aspects of our curriculum are going to be much more suited to certain students. And if you're looking at an estimate of a D or an E in a range of GCSE subjects, then it's time for the student and the parent to say, well, clearly these are not the best things for me. When I'm choosing my options, I'm going to look at other possibilities, perhaps foundational learning, perhaps level 1, level 2 courses in vocational or in applied, or in other areas where an A to C is not the only outcome. But I think it's really, really important. In fact, we had an exam success even for our Year 10 cohort last week, and one of the things that I was careful to point out when I showed a slide which was talking about aspiration was that, yes, there will be certain students in the year group who come out with a string of A stars, actually regardless of what their targets are and what their potential is, just because they work really, really hard and they access the right curriculum. But equally, there will be students who achieve their potential, and it's very important to recognise those students, and for whom we have added value by the end of year 11, who aren't going to get a string of A stars and actually may well not get any A star to C at all. Some of the students in our previous year 11 cohort did extremely well compared to their estimates, but actually they didn't get very many C's. So I think the answer to the question is to build a culture among staff and students and parents that says, this is your potential. We're very happy for you to exceed that potential, and we're going to support you in any way we can. However, we understand that every student has a different potential, and this is what the CAT test is telling us. And so long as you work very hard to achieve your potential, we're very happy.
I think I've just add one other thing, at the risk of stating the obvious. I was supporting a school only yesterday who were new CAT users and were seeing some of these reports for the very first time. Although you have reports there aimed at parents and reports there aimed at students, they're not designed to print off, stick in an envelope and post home to the parent. Heaven forbid. They are there as vehicles for your parental engagement agenda. And as Lee has already intimated, we have many evenings, exam success evenings, parent forums and so on. And just as we have to work hard with staff at understanding the data and understanding what it's telling you and how we're going to use it, the same applies to engaging parents in this process. You wouldn't just post them out and let them interpret it themselves. It's up to the school to build that relationship, and the same with students, of course.
Ones to catch up a little bit. So yes, we have experienced some challenge, and I guess we will do until really CAT is embedded through every year group and with every member of staff using it as we expect it to be.
I think the other thing to add is it's the way it's sold, and we heard Lee say that the staff were completely fed up really with the target setting process and didn't understand and was done to them. The thing about CAT, which we sold to the staff, was that it's independent of prior teaching. It's a measure of developed abilities, which is age-related and norm-reference. So we sold this as here's some data that will help us in deciding in a very informed way what the correct target is for each individual student. And just to emphasise the point already made by Lee, a lot of the biggest sceptics were in, say, DT and art and people like that said, what on earth has how well a child has done at Key Stage 2 in English and Maths got to do with my subject? Well, bringing in that spatial battery gave them something that they could relate to. So it is the way that it is introduced and the way that we've tried to engage them as a process in which they have some say rather than just having them imposed.
Okay, thanks for that. And we've probably time for one last question, which was, how do you find the results are skewed for pupils with English as an additional language?
That's a really interesting question, because actually we haven't found that they're skewed at all, the students who have English as an additional language. Part of the power of CAT is that the students can take a good amount of time to answer a question. We've used CAT for digital, and we've had groups of students in computer rooms doing tests. We've deployed TAs to support the students while they're doing the tests. And so we've been able to make sure individually the students have got an opportunity to access it. They've had headphones so they can listen to the question being read out, and they can review the question as often as they want to. So in a sense, the verbal abilities of the students are well tested, because if they can access the digital questions, they've got a little bit of time to think them through, and obviously the TA isn't able to help with the answer, but we can get a much more sort of individualised approach to helping individual students understand what the question is asking them and understand what the different possibilities are for an answer. So looking at the Year 10 data, I don't see any skewing at all. I think it's a very fair test of potential and what the students can actually do, and having English as an additional language hasn't provided a barrier.
Excellent, thank you very much. Well, I think that's all we're going to have time for today. We didn't manage to cover all of the questions, but we will follow those up with you separately if we can, Andy and Lee, and get those responses back to the people that asked them. For those that are listening to the presentation, thank you very much for joining us. In a few moments, you're going to be directed to a page where you can download the slides. So thank you once again for joining us today. Lee and Andy, thank you very much for that presentation. I personally found it very interesting, and look forward to hearing the next one from you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure, and good luck to everyone.
Right, cheerio, everybody.